gotta make it mine. I can, I will, I must, no matter what, I gotta make it mine. No matter what, I gotta make it mine. I can, I will, I must, no matter what, I gotta make it mine. I can, I will, I must, no matter what, I gotta make it mine. Can't see myself without this, why I'm putting in that overtime. There's no way to offend me, I can see right through it all. Throw it off and try to tempt me, I would not let it change me. No, I never said this life is easy. Didn't know a heart can get so cold, don't need no ice to freeze me. I'm so clutch, I stay on go, ain't got no limits anymore. World on the shoulders, the pressure's weighing me down. I look at the struggle as part of just wearing the crown. He was chosen to live by the grace I was found. No weapons against me, so stop me, I'm holding it down. Say I needed to want it like right away. I go through the nights and see brighter days. Say that you love me and I'm okay. Really about it, go all the way. Some things no need to talk about, and other things I can be just fine living without. Walk it in and walk it out. You know I got it like what's a trial. Plenty more that's in store, so good can't ignore. Ambition fuels a fire, help me to endure the rain. All it took for me is always give my everything. I can, I will, I must, no matter what, I gotta make it mine. I can, I will, I must, no matter what, I gotta make it mine. I can, I will, I must, no matter what, I gotta make it mine. I can, I will, I must, no matter what, I gotta make it mine. I can, I will, I must, no matter what, I gotta make it mine. Can't see myself without this, why I'm putting in that overtime.
All right, let's kick off this deep dive into Change Your Habits, Change Your Life. And of course, brought to you by Hustlers Rule the World. We're diving deep, really deep, into some fascinating ideas on personal transformation today, using a mix of sources, books, YouTube channels, really an interesting blend of stuff, ready to unpack all this.
I'm definitely ready. And what strikes me about this collection is the different angles it pulls from. You've got psychology, marketing, even philosophy, and even a touch of alchemy, which is kind of wild. It's like a really unique recipe for figuring out how to make those life changes, you know?
Totally. And speaking of recipes, one of the first ingredients that really hit me was the whole mindset thing. You know that book, As a Man Thinketh? It's over 100 years old at this point, but it's still got this crazy, powerful way of showing how our thoughts actually shape the world around us.
It really does.
There's this amazing analogy in there about thoughts crystallizing. Like first they become habits and then they actually solidify into our circumstances. It really got me thinking, even little tiny negative thoughts, they can have like a real tangible impact.
Yeah, and that's not just some philosophical mumbo jumbo either. There's actual science behind it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Dr. Andrew Huberman, he was on the Rich Roll podcast a while back, and he was talking about how dopamine, that chemical in our brains, it plays a huge role when we're talking about forming habits. Our brains are literally wired to chase pleasure and rewards.
I can relate to that.
Right. And when we hit those rewards, bam, dopamine gets released.
So if we can figure out how to make those good habits trigger that dopamine rush, we're golden then, right? We'll stick with them.
Bingo. Knowing how that whole dopamine loop works is like having the cheat codes for your brain. You can actually intentionally design habits that hit those feel-good chemicals.
Yeah.
Makes it so much easier to hit those goals, like hacking your own brain to work with you instead of against you.
That's pretty mind-blowing, right? But what about those times when we get stuck in that negative thought loop? As a Man Thinketh also digs into that, how stuff like fear and doubt and procrastination, they lead to some pretty bad outcomes.
It's so true. If we're constantly hyper-focused on what we can't do, on those limitations, we're basically training our brain to believe that those limitations are all there is. It becomes our reality.
Like we're setting ourselves up to fail before we even start.
Pretty much.
So how do we break out of that cycle? Find the motivation to actually change.
That is the million-dollar question. You know what really got me thinking about this? It was from the business YouTube channel. They have this whole discussion about what average even means these days. Like what we consider average, especially with stuff like attraction and relationships, it can be totally different depending on who you ask. Especially the differences between how men and women think about it.
Wow.
And it's easy to fall into that trap, right? Comparing ourselves to everyone else and feeling like we're coming up short.
So maybe what we think is average is actually totally warped by the information overload and all the influences around us.
I think so.
So how do we overcome that feeling of not being good enough
Yeah.
and actually take action, you know?
It all starts with understanding how our minds work, like under the hood. Daniel Kahneman, in his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, he explains how our brains often rely on what he calls System 1 thinking. It's our quick, intuitive system, the one that loves taking shortcuts and making assumptions.
That's efficient.
It is, but the problem is System 1, it's not always right, It can lead us down the wrong path, making decisions based on emotion instead of logic.
So we're like making snap judgments about ourselves and what we're capable of without really thinking things through.
Exactly.
Can you give me an example? Like, how does that actually play out in real life?
Okay, imagine this. You're walking down this dark street, right? And you see this shadow that kind of looks like a snake.
Okay, yeah.
Your heart starts pounding, you jump back, totally freaked out.
I'd be freaked out.
Right, that's System 1 taking over. It's fast, but not always accurate. And the same thing can happen when we're judging ourselves. We might, instantly dismiss an opportunity just because we feel like we're not good enough without stopping to really analyze the situation.
So it's like our gut reaction, but sometimes our gut's wrong.
Sometimes, yeah.
So how do we, learn to catch ourselves when that System 1 thinking is holding us back? And how do we start making decisions based on, logic and reason instead of just freaking out?
That's where the whole mind control concept comes in. Or maybe a better way to put it is understanding what forces are shaping how we think. Edward Bernays, he was writing about this stuff decades ago. His books, Crystallizing Public Opinion and Propaganda.
Interesting.
He was arguing that there are invisible forces always working behind the scenes, shaping what we believe, what we think, influencing our choices. It's like there's this whole other level of reality operating beneath the surface, and most people aren't even aware of it.
Whoa. So you're saying we're all being influenced or even manipulated without even knowing it?
To a certain degree, yeah. And it's not like those influences have vanished. They've just gotten more sophisticated, especially online. Mark Joyner, in Mind Control Marketing, he breaks down how psychological tactics are being used all over the internet to get us to do stuff, think certain ways, buy things, even feel certain emotions. It's wild.
Like targeted ads and stuff?
Totally. Targeted ads, how things are worded in social media posts. It's all carefully crafted.
So we're constantly being bombarded with messages that are trying to, control our minds. How do we even protect ourselves from that and make choices that actually line up with what we believe in?
It starts with awareness. The more we understand those tactics, the more we become conscious consumers, We can start to question the messages that are being thrown at us and make choices based on critical thinking, not just knee-jerk reactions.
It's like taking back control of our own minds.
Exactly.
But even if we have the right mindset and we're aware of all these crazy external forces, how do we actually stand out and succeed in today's world? It's competitive out there.
It really is, which brings us to the idea of becoming indispensable. Seth Godin in Linchpin. His argument is just being good these days, it's not enough anymore. We're living in the age of automation, global competition is fierce, jobs are being replaced by robots left and right, and skills can become obsolete almost overnight.
So how do we become indispensable? What separates the people who thrive from the ones who just get by?
Tim Grover, he's the guy who's trained Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, those elite athletes. He was on the Bigger Pockets podcast, and he had this really powerful insight. He talked about how it's not just about adapting, it's about overcoming. It's about rising above those challenges, pushing past your limits instead of just going with the flow.
So we need to develop that relentless drive to improve and be the best.
A big part of it.
But doesn't that run the risk of becoming too specialized? What if we miss out on other opportunities because we're too focused on one thing?
You bring up a good point. I think it's about striking that balance,
Yeah.
Building a unique set of skills, but also staying flexible, able to learn new things, adapt to the changing world. It's not just about being the best at one thing, but also being a constant learner, ready for whatever comes next.
Like a master of your craft, but also a lifelong student, always evolving.
Right. And let's not forget, we're not islands, right? The people around us, they have a huge impact on our success. The 48 Laws of Power, it explores this whole dynamic in a really interesting way. Robert Greene, he looks at historical figures who are masters of strategy and power. And one of the big things he emphasizes is the importance of being strategic with your relationships.
Absolutely.
The 48 Laws of Power sometimes gets a bad rap for being all about manipulation, but there's actually some real wisdom in there about how people work. It's not about being ruthless or using people. It's about understanding that every relationship is a two-way street. We need to pay attention to the energy we're exchanging with the people in our lives.
So how do we know if we're in a relationship that's actually helping us grow or one that's, kind of holding us back? What are the signs?
David Goggins, he had a great conversation about this with Andrew Huberman on his podcast. Goggins is all about authentic relationships. The kind where you surround yourself with people who push you to level up, who aren't afraid to call you out on your BS, your excuses, your bad habits. It's tough love, in a good way.
I like that. Surrounding ourselves with people who encourage us to grow, even if it's uncomfortable sometimes. It's about having people who love us enough to be honest, even when it's hard to hear. But okay, even with all that, the right mindset, the right people, and the drive to change, how do we actually make it happen? How do we break those old patterns and create new, lasting habits?
That's where we got to get practical. James Clear, in his book, Atomic Habits, he gives some seriously helpful advice on making those changes stick. He talks about implementation intentions.
What's that?
It's basically about taking out the guesswork, creating a clear plan of action instead of just vaguely hoping for change.
So instead of just saying, I'm going to work out more, you'd say, I'm hitting the gym at 7 a.m. every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for 30 minutes.
That's it. Making it specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Taking away that wiggle room for excuses, you're setting yourself up for success from the get-go.
Love that.
Yeah.
Simple but powerful. But how do we keep that motivation going when, life gets in the way?
I think a big part of it is connecting those habits to a bigger purpose. Robert Greene, again, on the Huberman podcast, he talked about how when we have a clear why behind what we're doing, it makes it so much easier to stay focused and motivated, even when things get rough.
So it's not just about changing our habits, it's about changing our lives.
Yeah.
Finding that deeper meaning behind everything we do.
Exactly. And that's what brings us to The Alchemist, one of the most inspiring books out there.
I love that book.
Me too.
It's all about that journey of personal transformation.
Yeah.
Right.
It is. It's such a great reminder that change doesn't just happen overnight. It's a process, a journey, and it has its own ups and downs, its own challenges and rewards.
Welcome back to our deep dive.
We're really unpacking how to break free from the stuff that holds us back, like all those things that keep us from really hitting our full potential. And I think one of the most powerful of those is fear.
Absolutely. Fear can be so crippling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fear of failure, fear of the unknown, fear of judgment, all of it can keep us stuck in our comfort zones, prevent us from chasing our dreams.
Right.
The Alchemist really nails that, doesn't it? How we have to face those fears head on.
It does. Remember Santiago, the shepherd?
Yeah.
He's so hesitant at the beginning to actually go after what he wants.
Yeah, he's scared to leave everything he knows, scared of failing.
Totally. He's standing there at the edge of this huge unknown world. It's terrifying.
But he also knows if he stays put, he'll never know what he's truly capable of.
Right. Sometimes the biggest risk is not taking any risk at all. That's a huge lesson right there.
It really is. It reminds me of that quote, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure."
Love that quote. It's our light, not our darkness, that scares us the most.
Exactly. And Santiago, even though he's scared, he goes for it. He starts his journey. And along the way, he runs into all these challenges that test him, push him to his limits. Like the universe is making sure he's really committed.
And he meets all these interesting people, right? Mentors, other travelers. He learns so much from them.
Yeah. And maybe most importantly, he learns to trust his gut, like his intuition. The old king in the book, he calls it the language of omens.
Oh, I love that.
It's all about paying attention to those subtle signs, the ones guiding us.
So often we overthink everything, We completely ignore that inner voice, the one that actually knows what's best for us. Quieting the mind, tuning into your heart, that's the key.
Having the guts to follow your intuition, even if it leads you down a path you weren't expecting.
Yeah, sometimes those detours are where the magic happens. Speaking of magic, one of the coolest ideas in The Alchemist is the soul of the world. This idea that there's a force that connects all of us, like a universal consciousness.
It's like tapping into an infinite source of energy, of creativity. And that helps us bring our dreams to life.
Exactly. But it all starts with that belief in ourselves, that trust in the journey and taking that first step. But let's be real, it's not always a walk in the park. There will be doubt, struggles, setbacks.
But those are the moments that define us, right?
They are. They show us what we're really made of. We find our strength, our resilience.
So many people are so afraid to fail, so they just play it safe, never really step outside their comfort zone.
And they never reach their full potential.
Right, because they're so worried about what other people will think.
We got to break free from that. Failure isn't the opposite of success. It's part of the journey. Every single successful person out there, they've failed, sometimes over and over again, but they didn't let those failures define them. They learned, they picked themselves up, and kept going.
Like Thomas Edison, right? I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work.
Exactly that attitude. Be willing to try things, to take chances, to get out of your comfort zone, and learn from those missteps. See failure as a new beginning, a chance to tweak things, try again, and get closer to what you want.
Don't forget, the journey itself is just as important as the destination. It's about all those lessons, the challenges, the people you meet along the way. That's what makes life so rich.
You never know, those unexpected detours, they might lead you to the greatest treasures.
Totally true. Life's unpredictable, always changing. It's all about constant growth and self-discovery. And sometimes, you find that the treasure you were looking for was inside you the whole time.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Let's shift gears for a bit and talk about the nuts and bolts of making those new habits stick. James Clear from Atomic Habits. He's got some killer ideas for making real, lasting changes.
Oh yeah. Habit stacking. That one really stuck with me. Linking a new habit to one you already have.
It's so smart, right? Like, if you want to start meditating every morning, maybe you link it to your coffee routine. Brew your coffee, sit down with your cup, meditate for 5 minutes before you take that first sip.
It's like tricking yourself into making the new habit feel more natural.
Exactly. Another one of Claire's strategies is making small changes over time. He calls it the 1% rule. If you can improve just 1% each day, those tiny wins add up over time. You get massive results.
It's like the tortoise and the hare. Slow and steady wins the race.
Totally.
Yeah.
We tend to forget about the power of compounding. It's not just about those individual 1% improvements, it's how they build on each other over time.
It's momentum, right? Creating a cycle where each win fuels the next.
Exactly. And we need that momentum because change is tough, man. There will be times when you want to quit, when you feel discouraged.
It's like in The Alchemist, when Santiago's about to give up on his whole quest, and then he remembers what the old king told him. When you really want something, all the universe conspires to help you achieve it.
It's about believing in yourself, trusting the process, even when things get rough. And, beside those practical strategies, there's also the whole understanding and managing those invisible forces we talked about earlier.
Right, those influences that shape our thinking without us realizing it.
Exactly. Edward Bernays, in his books about propaganda, he really exposed those forces. He showed how easily public opinion can be swayed. But what's interesting is that these techniques are everywhere now and not always used for bad.
So it's not just about avoiding negative manipulation, but also recognizing how these principles can be used to make positive changes.
You got it. Think about social movements. They use persuasive messaging to raise awareness and advocate for change. Or marketers. They use storytelling to connect with their audiences and build brand loyalty. Understanding these techniques can make us smarter consumers of information.
And better communicators ourselves.
Exactly. We can take control of our own narratives.
This all ties back to that idea from Linchpin, doesn't it? Being indispensable in this day and age.
It totally does. Being aware of the forces that are shaping the world, social, psychological, even technological, it allows us to adapt and thrive.
Makes sense. So we need to understand our own minds, those influences around us, and build the skills that help us stand out and make a real impact.
That's the recipe for success in the 21st century, right there.
We've covered a lot of ground in this part.
We have. We've kept exploring The Alchemist, looked at practical ways to change habits, and dug deeper into those forces that shape our world.
And don't forget, this deep dive is brought to you by Hustlers Rule the World. Join us for part 3. We'll wrap up this exploration of changing your habits and changing your life. We'll discover how to really unleash your full potential. Welcome back, everyone. We're wrapping up our deep dive into Change Your Habits, Change Your Life, and as always, brought to you by Hustlers Rule the World. It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? From the power of mindset to those, subtle forces shaping the world around us.
It has. It's been so cool seeing how all these different sources, classic books, modern podcasts, all these different angles, they all come together to give us this unique view of personal transformation.
I think one of the most powerful takeaways for me has been that idea of aligning ourselves with our true purpose. That personal legend from The Alchemist.
It's that deep down desire, the thing that pulls us forward even when the path gets a little foggy.
But figuring out that purpose, what we're really meant to be doing, That can be a challenge in itself, right?
It definitely can be. And Santiago, the shepherd and the alchemist, he really embodies that struggle. He's got this dream, this feeling deep down that he's meant for something more. But he's terrified to actually step outside his comfort zone.
So he's standing at a crossroads. Got to make a choice, but totally unsure which way to go.
And I think a lot of us can relate to that feeling, that fear of the unknown, that sense of being pulled in a million different directions.
But ultimately, Santiago decides to trust his gut. He follows those omens, takes the leap, and starts his quest. It's a good reminder for all of us, isn't it?
It is. Sometimes you just got to have the courage to take that first step, even when you don't have all the answers figured out.
And just trust that the journey itself will teach you what you need along the way.
That's the beauty of it. And that's what I love about The Alchemist. It's not just about reaching the finish line. It's about who you become during the process.
The challenges you overcome, the people you meet, the lessons, it all shapes you.
And sometimes those detours, the times when you feel lost, those can lead to the most incredible discoveries.
Like the universe is giving you a little nudge in the right direction, even if you can't see it at the time.
And that brings us back to that idea of the soul of the world, that feeling of connection. Like we're all part of something much bigger than ourselves.
When you tap into that, when you're living in alignment with your purpose, magic happens.
It does. You unlock this hidden potential, and the world just seems to conspire to help you make those dreams a reality.
But it all starts with that first step, having the courage to trust your intuition, even if it leads you into the unknown.
And remember, we talked about this. Change doesn't happen overnight. It's a process. It's a journey. And it takes patience, persistence, and that willingness to learn from your stumbles.
And those stumbles, those setbacks, sometimes they're the best teachers, aren't they?
Totally. They force you to reevaluate, to adjust, to become tougher.
They help you discover who you truly are.
I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from this entire deep dive. It's not just about changing habits, it's about transforming your whole life.
Becoming the best, most authentic version of yourself, the person you were meant to be.
And it's a journey worth taking, even with all the challenges along the way.
So as we wrap this up, what are some key things our listeners can take with them? Things they can actually apply in their own lives?
I think first, cultivate that growth mindset. See challenges as opportunities to learn and grow.
And remember, failure isn't the end. It's just part of the process.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to try things, take risks, step outside your comfort zone.
Find those people who support you, who challenge you to be better.
Mentors, a community. You're not on this journey alone.
And above all, trust your gut. Listen to that voice inside you that's guiding you towards your purpose.
Because deep down, you already know what you're meant to do.
You just got to have the courage to go after it.
And don't forget, this deep dive has been brought to you by Hustlers Rule the World. We're all about giving you the tools and the inspiration you need to achieve those big goals.
If you're ready to change your habits, change your life, and unlock your full potential, make sure to subscribe to Hustlers Rule the World for more explorations like this.
We'll catch you on the next one.